Ladies and gentlemen and ladies, I said I would, in the future, do a couple of videos with a couple of the stories that I wrote. Before I read the story that I'm prepared to read today, I want to read this. This is called The Power, and it's taken from my site, Vodir2.tripod.com. You see, Vodir, the word translates into Friends Forever 2.tripod.com/general photo album ID, /ID7.html. So it's not Flash, so you ain't got to worry about it flipping from one site to another like the others. It says, I hold in my hand the power to give life. I hold in my hand the power to destroy. I hold in my hand the power to feed all. I hold in my hand the power to cause disease. I hold in my hand chaos and disorder, anarchy and hatred. I hold in my hand sorrow and grief. I hold in my hand wisdom and knowledge. I hold in my hand space and time. I hold in my hand the world as we know it. I hold in these my hands. I am leader of my people. I can hold these in my hand, for I am man. As I keep saying, I am man. I can't blame the condition of the world on anyone else without blaming myself, because I am man. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, without hope, we are hopeless. This is called Grandpa's Story. Now this is on vodir0.tripod.com/this is it! Okay? You can just type in this is it and then go to Grandpa's Story. There's another one called Nisi. I like Nisi. And I'll probably read Nisi, but that has several characters where it's done like a story. This character speaks, that character speaks, that character speaks. Nisi! Alright, but this is Grandpa's Story. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my take on Grandpa's Story. I'm going to turn down the music just a little bit because it will distract me. I know this story, and so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Like I said, what I'm doing, this, I typed in, what did I type in for this? Basically, I just typed in instrumental, R&B instrumental, and then I went to R&B love sad song instrumental. Okay, and I kind of like it, especially playing in the background for something like this. So if you all, those of you who care to listen, if you don't, hey, hit that nice little X button at the top of your browser, and you won't have to. Or just hit the I don't care to listen to this anymore quit button on the program that you're running. Alright, this is Grandpa's Story. Hey son, come over here and let your grandpa talk to you. Sure looks like a good day. And you boy, looks like you got some big good ears on you. So you, here, take this cool glass of lemonade. Yeah. Now, that's some toddy and it's some sweet. Now, boy, which one are you? Oh, well, I can't tell one's you from another. Well, Michael, you sit here and listen to your grandpa. Do you know how your mama and your papa got to have all of this? Why, just look around you. All of this took was some hard work. And look, son, I'll tell you how. Well, why you should be grateful for what you've got. Way back some time ago, your great-grandpappy Wilbur Jennings was sold to the Jameson plantation back during the times of slavery when, well, people sold people like the corner store sold you that candy. They didn't care about folk. Now, the Jameson family were seemingly nice people. They treated your great-grandpa better than most of the other slave owners treated their own colored folk. One day, the Jameson family was on their way to visit their people who lived some 90 miles away, and they took your great-grandpappy and his pa along to help manage the supplies. It was also to comply with the law and to make sure that the slaves didn't escape. Grandpa, your great-grandpappy, and my pappy were both chained together and had to ride in the back of the horse-driven carriage. The trip was expected to take about 3 days, and well, they had to travel some dangerous roads. On the morning after they got underway, a very big storm was approaching, and there was no place for them to take shelter. Mr. Jameson had decided to press on anyway, despite the danger. He drove them horses hard and mean. He was intending on beating that storm. Meanwhile, Pappy and Grandpapa were getting soaked, as they had nothing to cover up with. With the rough ride and the danger of the moment, they were some scared. It was raining so hard and so heavy that the horses left the roadway and took the carriage over a small cliff. About a short ways, they landed in a small riverbed of raging mud, and the carriage was sunk. But luckily, however, Pa and Grandpappy were chained together. You see, they were thrown off the carriage just before the carriage went off the cliff. Still scared but grateful, very grateful to be alive, they both hugged each other and proceeded to call out for help. They called out for the Jameson family, but it was no use. They were all gone. So Grandpappy and Papa made their way back to the main roadway. They had been walking all night, and sometime the following day, men on horses rolled up, and Grandpappy and Papa did not say a word. One of the men ordered them to explain where they came from. After Grandpappy explained, the man whipped the two for lying, and they tied them to the horses and practically dragged them into town. Now, once in town, the sheriff questioned them and said to them that they would be hung for murder of the Jameson family, that the two would not be spared. They whipped them again and again until Grandpappy had lost so much blood that he almost died, and they postponed the hanging for 2 more days until he was able to stand. The people of the town were very angry, as they wanted to see the death of any slaves who killed their masters, and here the whole family was believed killed. In them days, they held hangings as very special occasions, and because of the violence and the blood involved, they would put it off until after midday, so that those who had just eaten their meals were completely finished. For the hope was that this would prevent them from vomiting the food they had just spent their hard-earned money on. Plus, it would be bad for business. The hanging was set, and the platform was prepared, and Papa and Pa had been led to the center of town, and the people threw all kind of food and cow droppings and horse urine on them. You know, the two of them did not cower. They held their heads up and marched right along. This made the town folk even more furious. The mayor of the town was not even allowed to give his customary speech, as the people wanted these two so-called murderers dead. As the ropes were placed around their necks and a bucket of lemon juice was placed and poured on the two because of the sores that the whips left, this was very painful, and the two of them screamed something awful. At this time, the crowd was now cheering again, and the sheriff was now set to give the order, "Let 'em drop." When 5 men came a-yelling up the main street, riding like madmen, firing guns into the air, telling the crowd and the sheriff to hold everything. As the men got to the center of town, the leader got off his horse and ran up to the mayor and the sheriff and turned and faced the crowd, and he said, "My name is Jonathan Jamerson IV, and these men are accused of killing my brother and the members of his family, and you people were set to take revenge on my family's death without notifying us. That's against Leonard's law. Second, I went out and I searched for my family and discovered that the others were there looking and searching too. And they explained what happened here and what story had been told by these two. And we discovered that just as these two had said, the carriage had indeed gone off a cliff into a mud-flowing ravine, and that not one of them survived. It took over 5 hours to dig them out, and there is no evidence other than your thirst for blood that gives cause for the hanging of any of these two. As I am now the sole heir, you are hereby requested to release these two men into my care, and I will not seek a governor's or marshal's intervention. Sheriff, you will also provide for the transport of my family's remains as well as the cost for burial, for the delay caused by you in finding my family. About 2 weeks later, the Jameson family offered Grandpappy a job as foreman over their plantation, made him foreman, and paid him the same salary as all the other non-colored foremen were receiving. Needless to say, this did not sit too well with many of them, but nevertheless it was done. Grandpappy made an arrangement with Jonathan Jameson, whom he came to call JJ. Yes, he suggested that part of his pay be used to pay the workers, and that JJ cover the rest. It was decided that they would receive 15 cents a week for about 7 to 80 hours of work. It wasn't much, but it was now that not only did they receive pay, but Grandpappy also requested that he would bring in the best crops, and if he did, then he should be allowed to use 1 acre of land for food for the workers. That the workers would plant and grow their own food and would do so completely on their own time. Well, this was more than acceptable to JJ. And when it came time for the harvest of the first crop, Grandpappy yielded twice as much as all the other plantations. On seeing this, their pay soon increased. Why, now the other farmers became quite angry for two reasons. They were pulling in less crops, and because Grandpapa was behind the biggest crop harvest they had ever seen. But Grandpapa came to be trusted by the people. Why, they started calling the Jamerson plantation Wilbur's Corner. The other owners may have been angry, but they could not excuse the fact that Grandpappy was making the Jamerson family a lot of profit. So eventually they started paying their slaves. And when some of the owners realized that it was not possible to call one a slave when he works and receives pay, they wanted to tax and charge them for room and board. So they went to Grandpapa and tried to forcibly persuade him to charge the workers for room and board. Well, he told them, "How is it that I should now make them pay for all of this? Why, my workers work harder than any others. And if I started overburdening them, why, the harvest would not be strong. And that would indeed be a bad thing." So he said, "No, I shall not charge them." Well, of course, that did not settle well with them. So they contacted JJ and told him of their need for his support. And he made a special visit to Wilbur's Corner. And when he arrived, he was quite surprised to see the workers happy. And he had learned that Grandpappy had the workers taking shifts. Why, in fact, he had gotten to see something that troubled him. Why, only half of the 180 acres was being utilized. And now, this upset him greatly. So he came to Grandpapa and demanded an explanation, and Grandpapa then referred him to your great-grandpapa, Uncle Marshall, his son. He told him of how great-grandpapa, of how great-grandpapa Marshall had learned to read and ordered books on farming, and that the land that was not being used was being prepared for the next crop. That this was the way he and his pa had done it from the beginning. That this is why they were able to get a better crop, because they were allowing the earth to heal from the wounds left behind by the tilling of the land. Plus, Grandpapa also explained that this was also the tradition passed on from generation to generation. Well, Mr. JJ left and went into town, and then came back and told Grandpapa to keep up the good work. Why, he had gone into town to check on this technique, and although he himself was not a farmer, which was partly the reason he let Grandpapa run the farm in the first place, he discovered that what great-grandpapa Wilbur and Marshall had told him was not only the truth, but was going to save him a great deal of money in the long run. Why, he told Grandpapa Wilbur that he was so impressed that he was not going to charge the workers, that things would stay the way they were. However, he had a special request, an important request for Wilbur, one that would have an effect on all of us who was yet to be born. Would you like to know what that was? Okay, well, oh yeah, I'll let you just sit there and listen to your grandpapa, okay, Michael? Mr. JJ asked Grandpapa if he could borrow his son Marshall. Why, he said that he wanted to train him in several areas, but namely he wanted him to learn schooling so that he could possibly take over one of his companies. JJ had no children and he wanted someone to manage his affairs should something happen to him. But he made Grandpapa Wilbur promise to tell not to tell Marshall, as he wanted him to come willingly. But after several moments of thought, Mr. JJ's assurances that he would be well cared for, Grandpapa Wilbur agreed. Well, JJ lived in the town of Little Rock, Arkansas, and he was a very important man there, even practically owned the whole town. He took little Marshall and he put him in school. Now, the school was mostly white, and, well, that's not true. The school was all white. Why, it was unheard of for a black man to be enrolled in school. Why, Mr. JJ had the teacher and the mayor come over to his home, and it was there that he told them that Marshall would be attending school, and that was that. A lot of the children's families were opposed to this, though with the power and influence of Mr. JJ, why, soon the commotion was settled. However, no other blacks were allowed to attend the school for quite some time. In the meantime, back at Wilbur's Corner, the townfolk attempted to cause him quite a bit of trouble. This was only due to the fact of the tremendous amount of success he was having. Why, they even burned part of his crops. However, this was after he had just harvested the crops the previous day. Because of how he managed the land, they actually helped in preparing the land for the next planting season. And the crops that was harvested netted over 15% profit over the last harvest. Why, Grandpa Wilbur was so successful that soon the neighbors were no longer attempting to tax or charge their workers of their land. They were all coming over to Wilbur's Corner. Why, soon in this town, people of color no longer were being treated or looked upon as slaves, all because of what Grandpapa Wilbur had done. Now, 7 years having passed, and Marshall was continuing to go to school, and he was put to work in the newspaper, the Arkansas Supreme News Source, as it is still called to this very day. While going to school and working at the newspaper plant, Marshall had no time for play. He awoke at dawn and he was back home by 11 in the evening. Even though he had made friends in the school and at the newspaper, he had not 1 minute to spare to get to know them. Well, because Mr. JJ had made a deal with him. He told him that if he would work and go to school and become the best at both, that he would and if he would give it all he could, that after 5 years, he would let him operate the newspaper and give him a partnership. He also promised to allow his grandpapa to become the sole owner of Wilbur's Corner. So, you see, there was a lot depending on how serious Marshall took his responsibilities. Why, he knew that the more questions one asked, the more they would learn. So he was constantly asking questions. Why, he soon became one of the 3 students on the teacher's honor roll. For 4 years he continued. Well, soon Marshall was to meet a young lady named Lydia, and she incidentally was the next black and the first female allowed to enroll in the school. She was a very beautiful woman. And, well, after 4 years, she and Marshall had gotten married. A year later, Marshall was able to buy a small piece of land about 3 miles from the newspaper plant. Then, one day, JJ called on Marshall and Linda, whom, by that time, had a son whose name was Kelton. Well, anyway, Mr. JJ told Marshall that he was now the majority owner of the Arkansas Supreme News Source. This made the both of them very happy. And he also told them that Mr. JJ had just returned from Wilbur's Corner and had just signed over the deed of the property to Grandpa Wilbur. That he had done this because the two of them had proven to be completely trustworthy, and because when his family died several years prior, that left him with no heir. Now you know what an heir is, don't you, son? No, no, not the air that you breathe. No, an heir is somebody who inherits something. Like you'll soon be an heir of this property. Well, okay. Well, little Kelton had grown to be about 6 years old, and Marshall had called his partner over for dinner, which they did 3 to 5 times a week. He told Mr. JJ that he was about to make a very important decision, and Mr. JJ was rather curious about what decision that might be. He thought Marshall was getting ready to tell him that he was returning to Wilbur's Corner. Noticing the worried look on JJ's face, Marshall assured him that it was good news. He told him that he and Lydia had talked about it and decided that Mr. JJ would become the child's guardian or godfather. Why, he leaped up with excitement and was completely overwhelmed. Oh, and was very grateful. 2 more years now having passed, and while the school had now too many students, the town agreed it needed another school teacher. So they came to Marcia and Lydia because she was helping to teach the colored children, and believe it or not, she was the only one qualified to teach, as she was the only one who knew what was being taught. That's because she received good grades and studied real hard. She smiled and said that she would be most truly willing, but Marcia stepped in and said no. This was truly disappointing. Lydia knew that he would never, he loved her and that he would never do anything to hurt her. And he repeated, no, no, no. You cannot ask her to stop doing the important work that she's currently doing. Why? And what would her pay be? No, I'm sorry. So they left. And just at that moment, Marcia, Lydia, and Kelton sat down, and he began to explain and said, Lydia, now I know you're disappointed, but you don't need money or them. You are already a teacher. The fact that they offered you the job proves that. Well, I remember when my father started paying the black workers from his own salary, people didn't like it. But because of the results, for over 52 miles round Wilbur Corner, no slave exists. All blacks receive salary for their work. They tried to persuade Papa, but he would not give in. And I tell you, honey, they'll be back, and they will offer you the same pay as Mrs. Limerson, and your own classroom with your right to teach your way. And when they do, you tell them only if your current students and everyone who wishes to join the school is allowed. I tell you, this will be the happiest day of your life, and all certainly change, and will certainly change what we went through 11 and 12 years ago. Mama agreed. And sure enough, they came and they offered exactly what Papa had said they would offer. This was a surprise to Mama. That's when she said no. This time, and she explained, she would only accept on one condition: that the blacks be allowed to enroll as well, especially those she tutored, and that a small kitchen be added to the school and a dining area for the students. They stayed for a brief moment and said no and left. Papa told Mama, don't worry, they'll be back. But after 2.5 weeks, Mama did worry. Then 3.5 weeks passed. The mayor and Mrs. Limerson and the sheriff, along with Mr. JJ, all came over, and they told Mama that the kitchen had been built and that the class was now ready, and that for this season the students she taught could enroll in her class only, but next year they would offer school to all children if she could prove herself successful. Oh, Mama was so happy. So happy. She shouted and she screamed. Oh, she just carried on and on. So, after 2 years, everything was working so well for Mama that she was honored by the governor. But something happened that made me so sad and changed my life for the worse. One day after coming home, Mama told Papa that she wasn't feeling very well and that she needed to lie down. She asked if he could prepare supper. And after about 2 hours, supper was ready, and Papa went into the bedroom to check on Mama. Now, I was sitting at the table having washed up for dinner, and Papa yelled, "Oh no, Lydia!" And he came running out of the room and asked me to run down to Dr. Carr's house. And I told him, Dr. Carr, you got to hurry, sir. You got to hurry. Mama needs you. Hurry, hurry. Dr. Carr went into the bedroom. His wife came along to assist. And when they got there, Papa Wilbur showed up for a surprise visit. But it would not be a happy one. Dr. Carr called Papa and Grandpapa into the kitchen with his wife, and I went into the bedroom without asking. We had a rule about going into Mama and Papa's bedroom without asking. You couldn't do it, but I had to. I had to make sure they weren't looking, and I went inside. Mama was awake, but she didn't look the same. She was crying, and I said, "What's wrong, Mama? Why is everybody worried? Mama, you okay?" And she said with tears in her eyes, "Come here, little Kay. Oh, my baby. It brings pain to my heart just thinking about it." But she said, "My baby, Mama's not gonna lie to you. Mama's not doing very good. Mama's dying." I said, "No, Mama, you can't die. Who's going to take care of me and Papa? And going to teach us? No, you can't die. We need you." This made her really cry. Why, she was so weak she couldn't even hug me. She said, "I'm sorry, son, but you promised me one thing. You take care of Daddy, and you keep your schooling. Will you promise, Mommy?" "Yeah, Mama. Yes, Mom. I promise. Mama, don't die. I'll be good. I not be bad no more, Mama. I'll eat my vegetables. And Mama, I'm sorry." Then she looked and said, "Son, it's all right. You're a good son. And Mama's proud of you." Then her eyes closed, and her hand fell off me, and the tears stopped. And I said, "No, Mama, don't go. Mama, no. You can't leave. You can't leave. Mama, no, Mama." Papa came in and he grabbed me, and I said, "No, Papa, don't let her go. No, Papa." He held me so tight, and we must have cried for 2 straight days. I will tell you, son, I've never felt so much pain. Why, if it wasn't for Papa being there for me when I would awake and crying for when I would go and get sad, I don't know what I would have done. Well, about 8 weeks after Mama passed, the school name changed to the Lydia Jennings School Building. However, they still needed someone to teach, and while Papa, being a hard worker and wanting to keep busy, he volunteered his services. And to keep close to me, I went to school with Papa and to work. Why, we soon became the very best of friends. Why, Papa would not do anything without talking it over with me first. As I grew, Papa gave me a job. Even though I had worked with Papa, this was an official job. I became the paper's junior editor, and Papa, of course, was the senior editing manager. When I turned 18, I finished school, and then we got a telegram from Wilbur's Corner. Grandpapa had passed in his sleep. Paul was saddened by this, but he said he lived a full life and left many things behind to be remembered by. The telegram was from Uncle DeChris. He told Papa that he would continue to operate the business like he and Grandpapa had done in the past. Papa didn't go to the funeral. He hated them, and the family understood. Wilbur's Corner had become so well known that even to this day people go by just to say they visited Wilbur's Corner. Every day when I and Papa would leave for work, we would stop by my godfather's house, JJ. About this time, well, he was also along in years, and upon my 20th birthday he asked us to rush over to his place. We thought something was the matter, so we hurried on over, and when we got there, and we'd be tired, and he would laugh, and Papa would say, JJ, after 34 years, I should be used to this. Are you trying to kill me? And JJ would say, you are always quick about things. Look, I have some good news, Marshall. Papa would smile. Good news? Why, what's the good news? I could show you some good news today, for sure. JJ would say, look, Marshall, you know you and Kelton are all that I got, and I am the happiest man alive to have you. Papa would say, I am so grateful you accepted me as family. Then JJ would say to Marshall, I am the one that's grateful and blessed. Now stop before you make me forget. You see, I'm old, boy. Tell the man that I'm old. And I would say, old? Papa, do you see anyone around here that's old? And Papa would say, no. And I would say, sorry, can't help you, young man. Then he hugged me. I loved that man. JJ told us that on the 15th, that was 2 days off, he was going on a cruise. That he would leave something special for the two of us. That it was a surprise, and he told Papa and me not to ask. Then he sat down to little did we know that JJ himself was dying. The cruise he spoke of was him dying, and the present that he left was everything. He left in his will everything to Papa and me. However, we didn't become happy while he was family. And you know this, he was a good man. He was special. Yes, J.J. Jameson IV was a very special man. While he saved Papa's life and always treated him with respect and honor, I still miss him. Papa and I had a decision to make. Mr. Jameson owned a lot of property in 3 companies, and we couldn't possibly manage them all. So we sold all the things JJ really didn't care about, but we kept the Arkansas Supreme News Source and the oil refinery. Daddy still taught school and ran the paper, and I moved into the mansion, and Papa stayed into the house that he and Mama bought. He made me promise not to sell it when he passed, and so I promised not to get rid of any of what he had left, including the rights to Wilbur's Corner. Now, by the time I was 26, I married a beautiful woman. She was one of the clerks at the newspaper. Her name was Imelda. Though she was special, she didn't care about money or property. She cared about me. And that's what she said she liked the most. Me. Then about 3 years later, we had your pa. Now, that one was some trouble. But I'm going to have to tell you about that some other time. For I hear your mama calling you now. Would you look at that? Time for supper already. Time sure passes these days. What's that? Sure, I'll finish the story another time. You just remind your old grandpapa, 'cause I'm getting old. You say you don't see. Now that's funny. You did listen, huh? Well, don't make your dear mama wait. You go on and eat. I'll be in there in a minute. Okay, I'll see you inside. Boy says he don't see old. Well, I hope they grow to be as old as I am, and that they can always cherish what we have and what we've got. No, it's not the wealth, but it's a family that loves you and cares for you and that is there for you. You see, Daddy, Mama, I didn't forget. Ladies and gentlemen, Grandpa's story. I hope you got the enjoyment out of this original story that was written in 1999, the same as I got from it. And know that quite a few people have expressed their complete wonderment about whether or not these events actually happened. This story is 100% fictional, a creation of the mind, and I want to thank you for taking the time. Once again, the publisher. Thank you.